Tonight I'm talking on the 10 Paramitas, and Paramitas is the Sanskrit word. The Tibetan is Paro tu Chinpa, and I always like to go back to the Tibetan and have a look what the Tibetan means, because I find it's often very revealing about the teaching itself if you look at the Tibetan. So Paro means beyond, the far shore, another world, somewhere you can travel to. And then if you add the tu chinpa, it means that you've already gone there, or you're already in the process of arriving at that place. So the sense of a paramita is that you're already firmly on the path. And these are practices for people who are firmly on the path of practice. They're firmly practitioners of Dharma. And so it's a kind of two-way thing. You can look at these and see whether they're functioning in your life, and maybe that's an indication of how firmly you are on the path of practice. Or you can notice when you haven't quite managed to come up to scratch with one of these 10, and remind yourself that you're on the path of practice. So they can play, you can play with them in those two ways. So these 10 paramitas are spheres of activity for the awakening practitioner, for the mind warrior, for the Jangchub Sempa, and for one who is aspiring to, or who is actually dwelling in non-duality. Now, Khandrib Dechen has written a very nice article on this topic that is posted on Aro Encyclopedia, so you can go and have a look at that. She talks about the paramitas from the Dzogchen perspective, and I'm going to include a little quote from that teaching at the end of each paramita. So first of all, I'll just give you the 10 with their English and Sanskrit names. Generosity, Dana Paramita. Discipline, Shila Paramita. Patience, Kshanti Paramita. Diligence, Virya Paramita. Openness, Dhyana Paramita. Knowledge, Prajna Paramita. Method, Upaya Paramita. Aspiration, Pranidhana Paramita. Strength, Bala Paramita. And Primordial Wisdom, Jnana Paramita. So some of you will recognize some of these words. They do come up in mantras and things like that. So first, let's look at the first one, which is generosity. The Tibetan is Jinpa, and Jinpa encompasses the usual meaning of generosity, which is to donate, to give, to offer, but also a sense of transmission or imparting something. Now, miserliness is a very narrow and limited view. It really limits your experience when you're miserly. It's very locked in to the me project and my needs and my wants, and an inability to open up to others. And so generosity is the opposite of this. Generosity is an unbounded state, free of this narrowness and miserliness. And in terms of the Dzogchen and Inner Tantra approach to generosity, it's very much talking about appreciation, that you own whatever you appreciate. If you appreciate whatever appears to your sense fields, then you own that through your appreciation. You don't actually need to physically own it in terms of it is in your possession. If there is appreciation at the point of perception of anything and everything, then you own it in the sense of you have perceived it and appreciated it. And so wealth is boundless. There's no limit to what can be appreciated and what can be owned through the sense fields and through appreciation. Now, in Tantra, we often use what might be called a negative word, a state that we don't wish to cultivate, and put the word Vajra in front of it to indicate its transformed quality. So in terms of generosity, we might talk about Vajra Greed. And this is the greed of wanting everyone, everywhere, to get everything they need. That appreciation is unbounded. I can enjoy you appreciating something equally with how I would enjoy my own appreciation. There's that sense of complete wealth through this experience of appreciation. So now I'll just read a short quote from Chandra Dechen's teaching. If my interest is in appreciation, then if you want something more than me, in terms of your capacity to appreciate it, then that is where it should naturally go. To focus on someone else's greater appreciation is a far more profound experience of avarice for me than if I sought sole possession. Generosity, in this view, is that sense of connection, the sense of energy in relation to other people and their infinitely varied circumstances. Excuse me, I have a drink. So the next paramita is discipline, and the Tibetan is Suntrim. This is often translated as energy, the energy to act appropriately, morality, ethics, the ability to hold vows. So discipline is very much tied up with one's conduct and demeanor in terms of being a practitioner who is awakening or being an awakened practitioner. So one's actions are congruous with, there is a congruity with the idea of awakening, with the intention to awaken. You are a genuine person, you have integrity. Your whole life is your practice. You don't partition it in any way. Now, whilst we dwell in duality, we need a structure that enables our conduct to remain within the path of non-duality, because we lack the full awareness of what non-duality is. We engage with discipline to give us the structure we need in order to work towards the experience of non-duality. So this discipline substitutes for a lack of awareness. And this discipline enables us to overcome our habitual patterning by applying self-awareness and discipline. Now, Chandra Dechen calls this it is the band-aid of discipline on the wound of duality. I really like that idea that we apply discipline to how we are, we notice how we are, and we apply discipline to how we behave, how we react. because that natural congruence with awakening is not fully formed yet. So we still need to put this band-aid on our conduct until the natural skin of realization has grown and it becomes a completely natural, non-referential state of being for us. Now, this is very useful to have this discipline and to have a structure of discipline, but we also have to be a little bit careful that the discipline doesn't become bigger than the path. So the discipline must not itself become a reference point. It mustn't become a cause of failing to develop awareness. So in some of the teachings, they'll talk about number whatever in the list of things you should do is applying the method. And then a number later in the list is applying the method is the problem. So we need to know when we can drop the discipline, when we are naturally engaged in appropriate demeanor, conduct, activity, but we need to know when we have to put that discipline back into place. So a quote from Candra Chen: "We are extremely dishonest about realization. We want it, but not now. We need a few more minutes in bed. We need to vent our spleen. We need to retreat into the form of boredom at tonight's dinner plan, all rather than sit in the discomfort of non-conceptuality. What we really want is to get as close as possible to realization and then sit back and admire our accomplishment." The third paramita is patience, and the Tibetan for this is zopa. Now, the ordinary translation of patience includes ideas of restraint, tolerance, endurance, forbearance. So as a practitioner, this would be in the sense of not just expecting everything to become perfect just because you're practicing. That life isn't going to become sweet and free of pain, and practice isn't going to become miraculously easy, and life is not going to just run smoothly because we're practicing Dharma. So we apply patience to be able to continue with our practice. So there's this quality of steadfastness and perseverance in the patience that we keep working despite life not always being quite as we would want it to be. So we're in terms of patience in the inner tantras, we're working with as it is, whatever that means, whether that would conventionally be called a good situation or a bad situation, a happy situation, an unhappy situation, and so forth. We embrace it as it is, rather than referentially getting bent out of shape because it's not as we want it to be. We recognize that we can be patient with the circumstances arise and simply continue to practice. It doesn't mean that we don't have a direction and we don't set plans into place, that we don't have an idea of how we want to practice and a pattern of practice, but we don't use that as a reference point. We hold it lightly and we don't let that dominate the situation. We have patience with whatever arises. So Candra Chen says of this one, Vajra impatience is a paramita of the Buddha karma of destruction, but dualistic impatience is desperation, a frenetic kicking against limitations imposed by situations in which we feel insecure, fearful, out of touch, anxious, or lost. So we have patience, recognizing that we cannot control the situation. We let situations be exactly as they are. The next paramita is diligence or exertion. And the Tibetan is sondru. This translates as a great many different words: strenuousness, vigor, diligence, industry, effort, assiduous striving, eagerness, zeal, assiduity, and enthusiasm. And there are three of these words that I particularly like, that I feel particularly grasp the sense of diligence, and that is eagerness, zeal, and enthusiasm. I particularly like the word zeal, because this is a joyful diligence. This is not diligence of feeling, oh, I've got to do that thing because I'm a practitioner. I've got to go and sit on my cushion and do my meditation practice, and I've got to do this length of time, and I only really want to do that length of time. And that's all been set aside. Once we are a fully awakening practitioner, we have this eagerness and zeal for our practice. We're fully engaged because we have pleasure in it, because we are interested in practice, that our practice is an interesting experience. It may not always be successful in terms of what we think we might want to achieve in a session of practice. So if we're practicing Shine, for example, maybe we were not successful in discovering a stable state and letting go of thought. But nevertheless, it's a success because you engaged in practice, because you were diligent and exerted yourself and put some energy into that. Oh, I've got something going on in my life at the moment that I think is a good example of this, and that's that I've just started a violin course. Because of various circumstances, I haven't been able to play my violin very much at all for a couple of years. And when we met up with a dear friend of ours at Dralajong a few weeks ago, she encouraged me to take a course that she's taking. It's an online course. And I was a bit unsure because she has been diligently playing her violin much more than me. And I wasn't sure how it would be. It felt a bit like leaping in at the deep end. But I joined the first class last week and I couldn't keep up. I knew I wouldn't be able to keep up. And yet it was still extremely inspiring, and I could see how I could progress even from what I learned. So I'm going next week, well, this week now, I'm going on Wednesday. And I know again that I won't be able to keep up, but I've got the enthusiasm, I've got the interest. It doesn't matter. Eventually I'll be able to keep up. So it's that quality of, I'm going to enjoy this, even though it might not be very successful. Unfortunately, it's on Zoom and they can't hear the awful squeaking noises I'm making. Or I can't hear the awful squeaking noises they're making, who knows? But I've got that enthusiasm, and that's what it means to be a practitioner at the level of engaging with the paramitas. It is also said that this diligence is a fruit of devotion to the teacher who gives you the path of practice, and devotion to the path of practice itself. So it's a joyful commitment that you undertake and place upon yourself. So Khandra Dechen's quotation: confidence in the Lama allows Sondru to manifest as fearlessness with regard to the open sea. With diligence, we can face waves that swell higher than the topmost sail, and therefore situations move towards successful conclusions with self-governed impulsion. We do not have to stand outside the situation, keeping a running commentary on our relative position, and therefore no time is wasted. The energy of Sondru ensures that we do not miss the swell of opportunities as they arise in the ocean of our life circumstances. Sondru is the joyous energy of complete involvement, rather than the timid, parsimonious feeling of obligation. Joyful involvement is beyond self-referencing, and therefore we fail to seek refuge in tiredness or boredom in respect of situations which are beyond our conceptual control. The next paramita is openness, insight, or meditative stability. A member of our audience will know this one because the Tibetan for this is Samten. And this has the sense of being concentrated, being absorbed in the experience of meditation. But this isn't just meditation sitting on the meditation cushion. This is meditation in the sense of one's whole life becomes meditation, because there is that presence and awareness and engagement with whatever occurs in any moment as practice. So there's that meditative stability of being able to embrace life circumstances in that way. And because of that stability, we're no longer being ridden by our emotions. We are no longer having knee-jerk reactions to situations. Things don't make us lose control of our emotions. If we recognize that something's making us angry, we see the anger and we can approach that through our practice and not allow that anger to manifest in a way that will hurt anybody. So there's something very clear and simple about this state of Samten, this meditative stability. Things become uncomplicated because we don't add the complication of trying to treat everything as a reference point, because things can be perceived simply and directly and responded to in a clear, simple manner without referentiality. Everything becomes very straightforward, and therefore that stability is there. We're not projecting onto situations anymore. So Candra says of this one, lacking experience of Samten, one lacks the ability to live the view with integrity, particularly under duress. One becomes a fair weather practitioner, one who lacks consonance with Dharma, when Dharma would be most valuable. Lacking the ability to be consonant with Dharma under duress forces the bit firmly into one's mouth and places the reins in the hands of the dementedly despotic monkey of the conflictive emotions. The monkey has the whip and spurs, which we have provided through our lack of experience of Samten, and we are ridden with a brutality commensurate with the intensity of our neurotic neediness. So that's the state we definitely want to let go of. So we need to make sure that our meditation practice on the cushion becomes sufficiently strong that our meditative capacity in every moment can be there for us, so that there is that clarity, simplicity, and stability. Now, the sixth paramita is knowledge, and the Tibetan for this is Sharab, which is translated as wisdom, insight, discriminative awareness, appreciative understanding. Now, this word Sharab is made up of the two syllables. She means mind, and Rab means ultimate, supreme, excellent, the best that can be achieved. So this is the ultimate high state of knowledge that can be achieved through the practice of developing knowledge. We can see our self-referential patterns, and we can hold the views of Dharma. So we're able to work in an intelligent way with those two aspects. So we've got the knowledge of knowing through engaging the practices that our teacher has given us, and we have the knowledge of seeing through developing the meditative stability that enables insight to begin to arise. So there are these two qualities of the mind. There's the knowing and there's the intuitive insight into what we know. Kandradachen says of these, Sharab exists in two forms. There is the Sharab of knowing and the Sharab of seeing. The Sharab of knowing deals with the emotions. It cuts through self-referencing and its resultant emotions. The Sharab of seeing is the transcendence of primitive preconceptions of the world, seeing situations as they actually are without our own projections. It allows for the possibility of pure appropriateness when dealing with situations. Now, these 6 paramitas, as we were first taught them, were the paramitas. And it was later in our lives as Buddhist practitioners that we discovered that there were actually another 4 paramitas, so that in all there are 10 paramitas. But these extra 4 paramitas are from the point of view of Dzogchen and tantric practice, as opposed from the point of view of sutric practice. So they go beyond this arriving at the wisdom of emptiness, the wisdom of recognition of the wisdom of emptiness. And the title of the 10 paramitas is, I think, is very interesting, because first of all, we have the paro to chimpa, which means someone who is definitely on the path. Then we have paro to chimpa drug, which means definitely on the path of the 6 paramitas. But then the full title of the 10 paramitas is paro to chimpa drug pa chu. And this pa is the same pa as earlier in the title, which means to go beyond. So this is going beyond the 6 paramitas into the 10 paramitas, and that is encompassed in the title of the 10 paramitas. Chu means 10. So the 10 paramitas go beyond, they cross the limit of Sharab and move into another area. But this new area is very much dependent on those previous 6. And if there isn't the stability of those previous 6, then the next 4 are not really possible. So the 7th paramita is method, or skillful means, and the Tibetan is tab. And this is skillful means in terms of ethically positive action, efficacy, beneficial expediency, seizing opportunities and observances, and skillful means. So method is based in the Sharab, the knowledge of knowing. You've learned the methods, you know the methods are available to you. They're available to you beyond the sense of having to think, oh, what do I do here? The method is immediately available. A situation arises or an emotion arises, and the method is immediately presents it to yourself, because you have reached that level of practice. And then the method, through the knowledge of seeing, this is the heroic stance that not only do you see the method that needs to be applied, you have the capacity to apply it. So the full path is embraced in terms of method. You know what the method is to escape duality, to enter into non-duality in the situation, in the moment, and you have the capacity to actually engage that. This can be, it's a heroic stance because it is extremely direct and uncompromising, because it may not always be comfortable. You see the method, you know what has to be done in this situation to be a practitioner. But part of you doesn't really want to do that because it's actually less comfortable than what you really want to do and would make life a bit easier. But because you're a heroic practitioner, you're a mind warrior, you engage the method. So Candra Dechen's, the quotation from Candra Dechen: compassionate activity is direct. It is not necessarily comfortable. There may be no warm, soggy smiles after the event. There is no guarantee of safety, even though our indestructible non-dual nature is our ultimate guarantee. Compassionate activity may appear unconventional. It does not accommodate nonsense, placate pomposity, or mollify our inner child. It reveals situations as they are. It deals with situations as they are. It might be painful to be dealt with in such a way and by such an energy. Compassionate activity tears away the reference points behind which we hide. From the point of view of referentiality, our means of dualistically comforting ourselves, compassion is blunt and somewhat ruthless. It demolishes the walls of our limiting patterns in order that we may step outside to taste our colourful, inspiring world. In stepping outside, we become more than we were. We become practitioners. The next paramita is aspiration, or the power of aspiration. The Tibetan is monlam. Mon means to a wish, to aspire, to desire, but there's also the sense of determination and intention. So it's an active wish. And lam means the path. So there's a sense of resolve there. We're actively engaging with that intention and aspiration. So this encompasses the capacity to hold vows, the capacity to follow through on intention, the capacity to be reliable, to have integrity, and to be certain of success, even when success is actually uncertain. And so I could refer back to my violin course here, that I couldn't say I was successful in the exercises in which we engaged in my first class, but nevertheless, I aspire to the fact that I will be successful if I practice and stick with it and continue to engage in those exercises that I'm being taught. And so this is a relationship with practice and the methods given to us by our teachers, that we may not think we're seeing success, we may not even know what success might look like, but nevertheless we engage in the practice because of our relationship with our teachers. And this is not in the sense of a competition or at the expense of others. We simply practice. So our experience of practice enables us to apply discipline, diligence, patience, and stability. Another good example of this is the Shine practice again, when you're trying to let go, perhaps you're engaging the count, and you keep losing the count at number 5, number 10, you've forgotten whether you're counting up, you're counting down, or whatever. Because of aspiration, we don't tell ourselves off. We don't give ourselves a hard time. We regard the fact that we've noticed as a success and as an inspiration. Wow, I noticed I wasn't present. I'm present again. And so we simply continue. And that simply continuing is the aspiration. It's the wish, it's the path of following through on our intention. So Kandradachen says about this, aspiration is not hope. It is not wishful thinking or expectation, nor is it hunger, yearning, longing, pining, craving, flight of fancy, eagerness, fervor, zeal, intensity, vehemence, enthusiasm, obsession, fascination, addiction, vain hope, or obsession. Interesting that actually some of those words were relevant earlier on, but we've moved beyond that now. Aspiration is a quality which must be reliable, or else it is not aspiration. Those who speak of what they intend to accomplish and never accomplish it do not have aspiration. So, in the initial stages of aspiration, discipline is required. The discipline of aspiration. The point instant in which we realize that we have drifted from aspiration should be the point instant of action and a moment of joy. It is a waste of time to be self-deprecatory. How do you say that? Self-deprecatory. Thank you. Self-deprecatory at this moment. The point instant resolution to return to aspiration is an instantaneously arising ornament of practice. It may occur many times in a day or a session. And if we remember frequently that we have drifted from aspiration, we should take this as a sign of success rather than a failure. This should be a continual occurrence for practitioners. Oh, we're running out of time. 2 to go. The 9th paramita is strength. The Tibetan for this is Tob. And any of you who have been with me on my journey in mind training will recognize that Tob is the subject of the 4th point of mind training, the 5 strengths. So at this point, as a definite practitioner, as somebody who is definitely on the path and has gained capacity. You have confidence in practice. You recognize yourself as a practitioner, and you are determined to continue and to succeed in your practice. You also have a willingness to enter what Candra Dechen calls the unrehearsed state of being. So you're willing to take the risk of not being you anymore, not knowing who you are when you're not trying to be you, a willingness to risk being vulnerable. Your energy does not wane. You're always engaged. You're always aware of the methods that are available. Your alert and presence and your demeanor and activity is congruent with being a practitioner. You're focused. You might recognize that there are mistakes. You know when you've gone wrong, but you let it go, you regret it, and then you just move on. You do not let that upset your stability. You remain stable and focused in your practice. And so you apply the knowledge and insight of the sixth paramita, of Sharab, and inspiration that supports aspiration, and these strengths manifest. You are a practitioner. That capacity is there. It can be relied upon. So Candra Dechen says of this, our circumstances appear either to work out or not. We are not wholly responsible for every aspect of our circumstances, but we are entirely responsible for our emotional responses in each moment. We need strength to be open to the raw texture of our lives without recourse to refuge in positivism, eternalism, or despair, nihilism. Each of these methods seeks to provide us with comfort, providing a buffer against the actuality of our lives. And then the 10th paramita of primordial wisdom. This is, the Tibetan is Yeshe. Ye means from the beginning, beginningless, primordial, has always been there, and She is mind. So this paramita is saying that complete awakening has always been there. It's primordial. And it's also saying that its nature is goodness. The natural state of the primordial mind is to be awake and to be good. There is goodness there. Good, basic goodness is the natural state of being. It is non-duality. And it is the state at which we exist before we insist on splitting it through duality. We actively engage in splitting it into duality. And what we need to do is just simply stop doing that. But because our natural state is this basic goodness, this primordial awareness, that natural state cannot help but sparkle through. A method, the practices that we engage with, they work with that natural sparkling through. I've forgotten the word. They accommodate it. I can't think of the word I was going to use. And so there's no referentiality there, but we naturally encompass this natural sparkling through and use awareness of those moments as a method, as an aspiration, as a sign of strength to discover this primordial wisdom. I really like Candra Dechen's, the quote I've taken here from Candra Dechen, that it talks about assuming goodness, and you're likely to experience goodness. And we had a nice example of this the other day, where there were a couple of lads in the park who'd got some of those electric scooter things. And we'd been thinking we might buy a couple of these for perhaps when we're up at Dralajong, if we end up having to stay in the town to travel up and down. And so we stopped and we asked them about these scooters. And they were obviously quite shocked at two adults they didn't know talking to them in a very sort of chatty, normal way. And they didn't quite manage to accommodate it, but they were polite and they did answer our questions. And so it was almost as if the fact that we approached them as though they would be able to talk to us, they were able to talk to us to some extent, even though it was obviously a bit of a shock. So I will finish the 10 Paramitas with the quote from Candidation for Primordial Wisdom. People whose basic goodness is less manifest will tend to anticipate problems with people and situations. They will not feel safe with regard to entering situations in an unguarded manner. They anticipate problems because they are fearful and have learned to be self-protective as their primary conduit of contact. Fearfulness always provokes the need to control. Having a sense of basic goodness means that everyone can be approached freshly. But this does not require gullibility or naivety. It requires that we avoid preempting every situation with respect to strategies based on the predilections of dualistic derangement. Basic goodness has no need to be proactive on the basis of suspicion. We can meet the basic goodness of others with disarming friendliness. If our view of the world is pervaded by basic goodness, then we can be open and our decisions can be based on trust rather than on suspicion. We expect good behavior from people, and we are therefore more likely to be met with good behavior. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ngakma Nor'dzin. I have a sense of heroism and joy from these teachings, that there's a certain point at which we have to engage with the path as heroes, because it's a challenge to how we see ourselves, but then there's also a sense of joy comes throughout, that if we engage with this, then the fruit becomes manifest in terms of realization.
Yeah, it is very joyful. Yeah.